Imagine swallowing a capsule, right? And it's packed with, like, 50 billion living organisms, and you're hoping they're going to heal your gut.
Right.
But then you find out that by the time you actually pulled that bottle off the shelf, every single one of those microscopic saviors was already dead.
Yeah, that happens a lot more than people think.
I mean, you basically just paid $40 for a graveyard in a gelatin shell.
Exactly. It's a real problem.
So for today's deep dive, we are taking you, the listener, and putting you squarely into the shoes of a product developer.
Which is a fun perspective.
Yeah. Your mission today is to build a brand new, top-tier, evidence-based probiotic supplement brand from scratch. And to do it without falling into the massive traps that just absolutely plague this industry.
Because, honestly, the supplement market is an absolute minefield.
Oh, for sure.
It's full of vague, unsubstantiated claims, and frankly, like you said, dead bacteria.
Yeah.
Consumers are completely justified in their skepticism.
Yeah, they're overwhelmed.
Right. So if this brand you are building today is going to survive, you just cannot rely on flashy buzzwords or, a massive list of unpronounceable ingredients.
You need actual science.
Exactly. You have to anchor everything in strain-specific human clinical data, highly precise delivery mechanisms, and a level of quality control that frankly borders on obsessive.
Obsessive is a good word for it. And our roadmap for this whole development process today is this really comprehensive guide by Laurent Fabian over at Ingredientsage. It's titled Probiotics Supplementation, a comprehensive guide to benefits, safety, and selection.
It's a fantastic resource.
Okay, let's unpack this, because building a functional probiotic, it's a lot like casting a movie.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Right, like instead of just asking a casting director for an actor, you need, say, a stunt driver who specializes in high-speed chases in the rain.
Right, highly specific.
Exactly. If you hire a romantic lead for that role, the movie crashes. And in microbiology, you can't just throw a random generic bacteria into a vat and expect it to cure gastrointestinal distress. We need a specific star for a specific role.
Which means, and this is step one of your blueprint as a developer, we have to completely abandon the generic genus and species names you usually see on cheap pharmacy bottles.
Like just saying lactobacillus.
Right, because two products can boldly claim to contain Lactobacillus rhamnosus, but if the specific strain designations are different, the biological outcomes for the patient can be, well, entirely unrelated.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So you have to define the exact clinically validated cast of characters for your specific indications.
Okay, so let's call some heavy hitters for our new product line. Looking at the data, it points strongly to Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, specifically strain ATCC 53103.
Yes, LGG. That's a classic.
Yeah, this looks like our action star for acute gastrointestinal distress, right? Particularly antibiotic-associated diarrhea and traveler's diarrhea. But, what is it actually doing down there?
Well, it really comes down to cellular architecture.
Okay.
This specific GG strain possesses these unique hair-like appendages called pili.
Wait, hair? Like it's fuzzy.
Sort of. When it enters the gut, it uses these pili to physically anchor itself to the mucosal lining of the intestines.
Oh, wow. It grabs on.
Exactly. And by occupying that highly sought-after real estate, it operates on a principle called competitive exclusion.
So it's basically taking up all the seats.
Right. Pathogens that cause traveler's diarrhea literally cannot find a place to attach. They just pass right through.
That's incredible.
And it gets better. It also secretes specific proteins that enhance the tight junctions between the cells of your intestinal wall.
Like caulking a window.
Yes. It effectively seals the barrier, which prevents the leakage of fluids that actually manifests as diarrhea.
So it's both a physical blockade and, a structural reinforcement team? That is fascinating.
It's a very busy strain.
Okay, next in our formulation lineup is Saccharomyces boulardii CNCM I745. And reading through the profiles, I actually had to do a double take here.
Let me guess. Because it's not a bacterium.
Right, it's a yeast. Why on earth are we putting a yeast into a probiotic formula?
Well, that is the exact biological advantage of this organism.
How so?
Think about it. When a patient takes a broad-spectrum antibiotic, that medication is designed to rupture bacterial cell walls. It acts like a carpet bomb, just wiping out the beneficial bacteria along with the infection.
Right, which is why antibiotics mess up your stomach so badly.
Exactly. But a yeast is a eukaryote. Its cellular structure is fundamentally different from bacteria. The antibiotics simply do not recognize it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it bypasses the antibiotics radar entirely, so it can survive and protect the gut environment while the patient is actively taking their medication.
It's essentially immune to the drug that's causing the problem in the first place. That solves a massive biological design flaw in standard probiotic therapy.
It really does. Plus, it secretes specific enzymes, proteases, that actively seek out and digest the toxins produced by dangerous infections like C. difficile.
That is wild.
It is. But, and this is crucial for you, as the product developer utilizing a yeast introduces a major labeling requirement.
Oh, right, because of allergies.
Well, yes, and interactions.
Yeah.
Consumers with yeast intolerance, or those actively taking antifungal medications, need explicit warnings, because an antifungal will wipe this strain out just as easily as an antibiotic wipes out a bacterial strain.
Makes total sense. We'll definitely flag that for the packaging department, but yeast doesn't cover every base, right?
No, it doesn't.
If we are building a broad-spectrum product, we need a generalist to complement these highly specialized strains. And the data highlights Lactobacillus acidophilus NCFM as a really reliable candidate for general GI comfort.
Yes, NCFM is a powerhouse of fermentation.
Fermentation, like brewing.
Kind of. Once it colonizes the colon, it ferments carbohydrates that your body couldn't digest, and it converts them into lactic acid.
Okay, and why is lactic acid good?
Because this localized production of lactic acid slightly lowers the pH of the colon. It makes it slightly more acidic.
Ah, I see.
Most pathogenic bacteria thrive in neutral or slightly alkaline environments. So by gently acidifying the neighborhood, the NCFM strain creates a hostile environment for invaders.
So it's basically terraforming the gut.
Exactly. And at the same time, that acidity promotes regular peristalsis, which helps with stool consistency.
Okay, now, what if we want to expand our brand portfolio? Like, let's say we want to target families or pediatrics. We obviously can't just give adult doses of adult strains to infants.
Yes, why not?
So I'm looking at the profiles for Bifidobacterium animalis subspecies lactis BB12 and Bifidobacterium infantis 35624. They look incredibly promising here.
Those are two of the most heavily scrutinized strains in pediatric gastroenterology.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Infantis 35624 is uniquely adapted to thrive on human breast milk oligosaccharides.
Which makes it perfect for babies.
Precisely. It's an ideal colonizer for infant gut health. But the BB12 strain is particularly interesting when we look at the reduction of eczema in high-risk infants.
Wait, eczema? Like the skin rash?
Yes. We are talking about populations with a genetic tendency to develop allergic diseases, a condition medically referred to as atopy.
But how does an organism in the gut stop a skin condition like eczema? That seems like a massive physiological leap.
It does seem like a leap, but it's a profound demonstration of the gut-skin axis.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Sure. In an infant with a high risk for atopy, their immune system is often skewed toward a specific type of inflammatory response. It's known as a Th2 response, and it triggers allergic reactions on the skin.
Okay.
The BB12 strain interacts with the immune cells located just beneath the gut lining. It sends biochemical signals that literally help balance the immune system, pulling it away from that hyperreactive allergic state.
Wow. It's like a thermostat for the immune system.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so putting on my marketer's hat for a second here.
Uh-oh.
Hear me out. If LGG stops diarrhea, BB12 stops eczema, and NCFM improves digestion, shouldn't I just dump all of them into one giant vat? I mean, I'm looking at competitor products on the shelf right now boasting 100 billion CFU, 30-strain broad-spectrum mega blends. Consumers love a massive ingredient list. More bacteria means a better product, right?
This raises an important question, and it's probably the most pervasive myth in the industry. That kitchen sink approach will absolutely tank your clinical efficacy.
Really? Why?
The biological reality is resource competition. If you blindly combine 30 different strains in a single capsule, those bacteria will often compete for the exact same nutrients and attachment sites in the gut.
Oh, so they get in each other's way.
Worse than that, in some cases, they will actually secrete antimicrobial peptides called bacteriocins to actively kill competing strains before they can even colonize.
Wait, what? So they are essentially fighting to the death inside the capsule or the stomach, and nobody ends up doing their job.
Exactly. It's the exact opposite of what the consumer's paying for. A single strain precision product is almost always superior when targeting a highly specific, robustly proven indication.
Like using LGG for traveler's diarrhea.
Exactly. A multi-strain approach is only clinically justified if you have hard data showing that Those specific strains work synergistically rather than antagonistically.
So we have to be strategic architects, not just like hoarders of bacteria.
Yes.
All right, so we have our elite cast of strains selected, but now we hit that biological roadblock I alluded to at the very beginning. A dead probiotic is a useless probiotic.
Very true.
The human stomach is basically a vat of battery acid, right? The pH is around 1.5. How on earth do we get these living, fragile organisms through that highly hostile environment so they can actually colonize the lower intestines?
This is where we shift from microbiology to advanced delivery engineering.
Okay, I love the sound of that.
If you just put naked bacteria into a standard gelatin capsule, the stomach's parietal cells, which pump out hydrochloric acid, will obliterate the vast majority of your payload within minutes.
Just fry them.
Yep. To solve this, you need to utilize an enteric coating.
Okay, I've seen that term on pain relievers sometimes. How does an enteric coating actually differentiate between the stomach and the intestines? Is it like on a timer?
No, not a timer. It operates on a strict chemical trigger based on pH.
Oh, interesting.
An enteric coating is typically made of specialized polymers, like methacrylic acid copolymers. In the highly acidic environment of the stomach, these polymers remain tightly coiled and completely insoluble.
So they act like a microscopic suit of armor.
Exactly. But once the capsule passes through the stomach and enters the small intestine, the environment suddenly shifts to a neutral pH of around 7.
And that sudden shift in acidity is the key that unlocks the armor.
Yes. The polymers instantly uncoil and dissolve, releasing your fully viable living payload exactly where they have the real estate and nutrients to survive. It maximizes delivery directly to the colon.
Okay, that perfectly solves the capsule problem. But going back to our pediatric line with the BB12 strain, we obviously cannot give an enteric-coated capsule to a 6-month-old.
Right. For pediatrics or even adult populations with swallowing difficulties, adherence to the regimen drops to 0 if the format is difficult to take. Powders or liquid suspensions are mandatory here.
But then you lose the armor.
You do. Since you lose the physical protection of the enteric capsule, you have to compensate by significantly increasing the initial dosage. You have to account for the expected die-off in the stomach acid to ensure enough viable cells actually survive the journey.
You know, this journey to the gut, it reminds me of sending human explorers to Mars.
How so?
Well, you can't just drop a team of astronauts on a barren, hostile planet and say, good luck, build a colony. You have to send their life support. You have to pack their food, too.
I love that. And what's fascinating here is that the microbiological equivalent of packing a lunch for your Mars explorers is creating a formulation known as a symbiotic.
Symbiotic, with an S-Y-N.
Right. This is the combination of your probiotic, the live organisms, with a prebiotic.
And prebiotics are the food.
Exactly. Prebiotics are specific types of indigestible dietary fibers that serve as the exclusive food source for your beneficial bacteria.
So what are we actually packing in this microbial lunchbox?
Well, in pharmaceutical terms, we look at the excipients. Excipients are usually just the inactive bulk ingredients used to carry the active medicine in a pill.
Like fillers.
Right. But in a symbiotic formulation, we use highly active, fiber-rich excipients, things like fructooligosaccharides or FOS and inulin.
Okay.
The human body cannot digest these fibers, but bacteria like bifidobacteria absolutely thrive on them. By co-formulating the strains with these specific fibers, you give the bacteria an immediate energy source the exact second they wake up in the gut.
Which drastically improves their colonization success rate.
Precisely.
And, you know, from a branding standpoint, replacing synthetic filler ingredients with functional plant-based fibers, that perfectly aligns with the clean label positioning that premium consumers are actively looking for. But earlier, you mentioned the staggering amount of dead bacteria on the market. Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's tackle that head on. We have our enteric-coated capsule, and we packed a lunch for the bacteria. How do we guarantee the customer actually gets a living product?
Okay, you are touching on the darkest secret of the supplement industry.
Oh, boy.
It's all about labeling practices regarding CFU, or colony-forming units. A terrifying number of brands label their products based on the CFU count at the time of manufacture.
So when it's made at the factory.
Right. They might pump 50 billion CFUs into the capsule in the factory, print that massive number on the label, and ship it out. But bacteria naturally die over time, especially if they're exposed to heat or moisture.
So by the time it sits in a hot warehouse, gets driven across the country in a sweltering delivery truck, and then sits on a pharmacy shelf for a year.
That 50 billion could be reduced to near 0.
Man, that is brutal.
And it often is. So to build a brand that complies with rigorous regulatory standards and actually works, your label must guarantee the exact CFU count at the time of consumption, meaning on the very last day of its expiration date.
But if the die-off is inevitable, how do you engineer a product to guarantee a specific number 2 years in the future?
You calculate the biological attrition rate, and then you over-engineer the capsule.
So you stuff it full.
Basically,
Yeah.
if your clinical data requires 10 billion viable cells at the end of a 2-year shelf life, you might have to formulate the capsule with 40 or 50 billion cells on day 1 to account for that mathematical die-off curve.
That makes sense.
You also must implement strict temperature-controlled distribution, the cold chain, and utilize desiccant-lined bottles that aggressively pull moisture out of the air.
Because moisture prematurely wakes the bacteria up from their dormant state, right?
Exactly. Finally, you subject the final product to real-time stability testing chambers to physically prove the survival math.
Okay, so what does this mean for our marketing copy? Because I want to write a tagline that says, "This precision symbiotic capsule will heal your gut and cure your digestive problems overnight."
Do not do that.
Wow.
If you write that, you will destroy the trust you just spent millions of dollars building.
Fair enough.
Ethical and responsible product development requires extreme transparency. Meta-analyses of clinical trials repeatedly show that while the benefits of probiotics are real, they're usually modest.
Modest.
Yes, they are not pharmaceutical magic bullets. You have to educate your customers that a probiotic is an adjunct therapy. It is part of a broader lifestyle and medical care plan.
So we really have to manage the consumer's expectations.
Absolutely. The outcomes are highly dependent on the chosen strain, the dosage, the duration of use, and the baseline health of the individual's gut microbiome.
Right.
If you promise a miracle and deliver a modest incremental improvement, the consumer feels scammed. But if you promise a scientifically validated incremental improvement and deliver exactly that, you secure a customer for life.
Okay, let's talk about the baseline health of the consumer. We are putting massive amounts of live organisms into the human body. Are there populations where introducing live bacteria is fundamentally dangerous? Like, who should absolutely not be taking our new product?
It's an important question. While these strains have an incredibly long history of safe use in the healthy general public, there are distinct high-risk populations where the introduction of live microorganisms can trigger severe adverse events.
Like who?
Specifically, severely immunocompromised individuals, patients with central venous catheters, or neonates in intensive care units.
What actually happens biologically in those cases? Do the bacteria, turn pathogenic and attack?
They don't turn pathogenic, no, but they end up in the wrong place.
Oh.
In a patient with a severely compromised immune system or a critically damaged intestinal barrier, the live probiotics can translocate. They literally cross the gut barrier and enter the bloodstream.
Oh, wow. That sounds bad.
It is. It leads to incredibly dangerous conditions like bacteremia or fungemia in the case of a yeast strain.
So we need clear warnings.
Yes. Educational material on your packaging must clearly instruct consumers to stop use and seek immediate medical evaluation if they develop a fever, chills, or systemic signs of infection after starting the regimen.
Okay. So looking at the blueprint we've mapped out today, as a product developer, you've constructed a truly formidable brand.
I'd say so.
You ditched the generic buzzwords for clinically validated stars like L-rhamnosus GG for barrier reinforcement and BB12 to modulate pediatric immune responses. You completely avoided the kitchen sink formulation trap.
Crucial step.
You engineered pH-sensitive enteric coatings, and you packed fiber-rich symbiotic lunchboxes to guarantee survival. And you backed it all up with transparent, expiration-dated labeling and honest clinical expectations.
It is a phenomenal version 1.0.
Right.
But the microbiological landscape is evolving rapidly. Looking at the future directions outlined in the data, the industry is already pivoting toward live biotherapeutic products, or LBPs.
What's an LBP?
They blur the line between a dietary supplement and an FDA-regulated pharmaceutical. We are also seeing the dawn of highly personalized probiotics.
Personalized.
Yeah.
Like custom-made.
Exactly. A patient submits a stool sample, and an algorithm formulates a custom bacterial blend designed specifically to fill the precise gaps in their unique microbial profile.
So the level of precision is moving from, like, a sniper rifle to a laser beam.
Exactly.
Man, but before we finalize our launch today, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final, mind-bending concept from the research.
Oh, this is a good one.
Because we just spent our entire time obsessing over the survival of these organisms, the overages, the moisture-sucking bottles, the enteric armor. We firmly established that a dead probiotic is completely useless.
Right. That has been the central, undisputed dogma of the entire field for decades.
Yet the research introduces this rapidly accelerating field of postbiotics. And by definition, postbiotics are deliberately non-viable, meaning entirely dead microbial cells or their isolated components that still confer a measurable health benefit to the host.
The mechanism here is just profound.
How does a dead cell do anything?
Well, when we look at how the immune system interacts with bacteria, it doesn't necessarily care if the organism's heart is beating, so to speak.
Okay.
The immune cells lining the gut are really just reading the physical structures of the bacteria, things like peptidoglycan in the cell walls or specific surface proteins.
So even if the bacteria is dead, its physical corpse still acts as, like, a structural key that unlocks the immune response.
Exactly. And the implications for safety are massive. If you use a postbiotic, you completely eliminate the risk of bacteremia in those immunocompromised patients we discussed.
Because dead bacteria cannot replicate or cause an infection.
Exactly. Furthermore, your manufacturing complexities, the cold chain shipping, the real-time stability testing, the protective coatings, almost entirely vanish.
Wow. It completely flips the script on everything we just built.
It really does.
So as you go off to launch your new evidence-based brand, ponder this. If we can extract the exact structural components and health-promoting compounds from these microscopic organisms without ever needing to keep them alive, does the future of the multi-billion-dollar live probiotic industry actually lie in harnessing the incredible, stable power of dead microbes?
It is a structural paradigm shift. It will undoubtedly rewrite the product development playbook all over again.
It's enough to keep any product developer pacing the floor at night. Keep questioning the labels you see on the shelves, keep digging into the cellular mechanisms, and good luck launching your new brand.
Until next time.